We are joined today by Frédérique Irwin. Frédérique is a director for the Sorensen Impact Center's Data, Policy, and Performance Innovation team, where she leads project development and implementation and manages high-level partnerships with leading organizations in the social impact sector. She brings over 20 years cumulative experience in strategic management, consulting, business development, strategic advisory, and entrepreneurship. She has taught business management at the Kogod School of Business at American University. In 2020, she was accepted as a New Zealand Edmund Hillary Fellow, a global fellowship for impact entrepreneurs. She holds an MBA from the College of William and Mary and a Bachelor of Arts in Russian Studies from Davidson College. Before I turn the time over to her, she has said to use the chat box openly for questions and comments. And with that being said, I will now turn the time over to Frédérique.
Thank you, Josh. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here with you guys. Thank you for spending a little bit of your Saturday with me. I'm excited to talk about social entrepreneurship and social impact, share a little bit about the Sorensen Center. But before we get started, I really would love to know, you guys know a little bit about me. I'd love to know a little bit about you guys. And I thought maybe we could start with some intros so that I shape the conversation really more around what you guys want to know, and make sure that I, hit those spots. So how about you guys tell me your name, perhaps what you're studying if you're in school, and what brought you to the conversation today, or what you hope to learn today. Yeah? Robert, you want to go first?
Yeah, I guess you guys already know my name, but I'm a fourth-year biochem student at the U. I'm also a PL for the Benyon Center. Yeah, I'm just kind of excited to learn about more of just the civil engagement, and yeah, it's good to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. So my name's Nick Galloway. I'm somewhere in between my fourth and fifth year as an accounting student at the University of Utah. And I'm interested in social entrepreneurship, just because it's kind of, as we look at businesses going forward, it's kind of a really big aspect of the way that businesses are planned. But it's also to keep in mind looking at what businesses are planning and what they're actually doing and seeing the difference.
Yeah, there's a big difference between, in my mind, between kind of companies that are social impact driven and social entrepreneurship. So I'll touch a little bit on the differences between that and how to kind of know what you're looking for as you go out there. Colby, how about you?
Morning, everyone. My name is Colby. I am a staff member at the U, working within the business school, and I'm a career coach. So the reason why I really wanted to engage in this session beyond sort of my own personal interests is to better understand how I might support our students that are wanting to be entrepreneurs and engage in that sort of specific niche market.
It's not going to be niche for long.
Which is good, which is good.
Yeah, awesome. Great to have you. How about, who wants to go next?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. I'm Courtney. I work at the Benyon Center with our community partnerships. And I was really interested in this specific session. I learned a little bit about social entrepreneurship in my grad program, and actually had a very odd experience with my professor and didn't love it. So I'm excited to learn more and from different perspectives. So.
Okay.
I can go next. My name's Josh. I was on the Benyon Conference Planning Committee. I'm a third year studying Spanish and community engagement. And I'm very interested in this topic because I'd like to work in social impact in some sort. So learning about the different facets and what it really entails is what is sparking my interest.
Awesome. Lindsay or Marianne?
I can go. My name's Lindsay. I'm a third year in emergency medical services with a pre-PA. I'm one of the PLs for the Benyon Center and Primary Children's. And honestly, I didn't know very much about the topic, and that's the reason why I chose it, is because I wanted to learn more.
That's awesome. I'm thrilled to have you. How about you, Marianne?
So my name is Marianne, and this is my second year, and my major is family consumer studies with a minor of political science. And the reason why I was referred to this is because I was just really interested on the community outreach and just wanted to look into it.
Awesome. Did you say family consumer services?
Family consumer studies.
Consumer studies. Interesting. Okay, great. Good deal. Everybody, did we get everybody? I think so. Okay. So the first thing I want to share with you guys is a little bit about kind of what is social impact. And for those of, is anybody familiar with the Sorensen Impact Center over in the business school? Do you guys know kind of who they are, what they do? Kind of?
Slightly, yes.
A
I'm
little bit?
brand new.
Okay, great. Me too, by the way. I only started at the U in September, so I'll tell you what I know so far. What I'm going to do is I'll start by just sharing like a couple of slides about Sorensen, so that you guys know just even what are the resources within the U at the business school, and how Sorensen describes social impact. And then what I'll talk a little bit about is kind of what's the difference between, you know, the work that we're doing at Sorensen and how to get involved in that versus kind of social entrepreneurship. And I always say you don't even have to think of yourself as an entrepreneur to begin to be a social entrepreneur. And so I'm going to share my story of the company that I built and recently sold in June. And it was a company that started out really not even as a business, but it happened to be a social kind of impact organization. So anyways, that's how I was going to go. If that makes sense to you guys, let me share my screen. Oop, hold on, hold please. Nope. All right. Can you guys see that? Yeah. Okay. So Sorensen Impact Center is really an organization that works with, we are a nonprofit. We work with organizations that can be either family foundations, other nonprofits, large foundations, as well as for-profit organizations. And whoop, sorry, my slides just went kind of ahead. So what people think about when they think about Sorensen is the fact that we're really good at measuring impact. And the way we do that is we have these really talented data scientists that know how to measure truly the impact of whatever it is that you're trying to do. And that could be from improving higher ed from an equity perspective or diversity perspective. That could be for a large corporation that is reinventing the soda can, and wants to know, hey, if we make a better can and we fill it here and we distribute it here, are we using less water? And what's the impact of that on the environment? Are we, you know, having less of a carbon footprint because everything is happening under one roof? And it can also be work that we would do and measure for family foundations that come to you and they say, you know, we've done very well, we're very grateful, and we want to invest our money, but measure the impact of our investment in things like bringing better education choices to rural America and making sure that those kids in rural parts of the United States then go off to college and stay in college. And so really at the core of what we do is this data science piece, is our ability to measure everything we do. And the other kind of underlying element to everything we do is the storytelling piece. And so we've worked with Forbes, for example, to publish the stories that and the reports and the results that we find. We've worked every year, there's a summit that Sorensen will put together that showcases some of the work that's being done. And so the way those two things kind of happen, so the data science as well as the storytelling, is kind of through 4 different, I don't know if you want to call them, kind of different avenues. And so one is impact investing. And that's the business of actually having a portfolio, raising a fund, for those of you guys who aren't in finance, raising a fund, however much money that is, and then allocating that money directly into companies or organizations that are impact focused. And oftentimes measuring through our impact strategy team what those companies or organizations are doing with the money, and then telling the story of what those companies that were given the money were able to do. And then impact finance is thinking more broadly about how do we get federally available resources, or even state and local available resources, to the hands of organizations or people or communities that are trying to make an impact. So those are the 4 parts of Sorensen. And what attracted me to Sorensen, when I sold my company, I was kind of like, well, now what am I going to do? I've been the boss for 10 years, what do I want to do? And what attracted me to Sorensen was that I was looking for an organization that did kind of what I call kind of the whole gamut. And so there's a lot of people who talk about impact, and they're talking about one of these things. They're talking about impact investing or impact finance or impact strategy / consulting. And what's really cool about what's happening at the U is that Sorensen is kind of an end-to-end solution. And the piece that I didn't mention that I absolutely love is the integration of students into everything that we do. And not just students as interns, but students as really kind of amplifiers of their voice into the work that we do. And so, for example, I have been supporting a project since I started for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that really at its core, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation wants to make sure that the future of higher ed is not only more equitable to all, but that there's also a really big influence of student voice as to what the students want and students need and see as the issues today and in the future. So we're not just doing, analysis and building data indices and measuring the impact of what would happen if people had access to those indices. We're actually working with a team of students that participate not only in all our meetings every week, but also in, for example, the last 2 days of convenings we had with leaders, chancellors, presidents of universities, to really get smarter on what are those folks saying. And then they're building their own report. And so they're doing their own separate project that is truly driven by the student voice. And that's what you'll see on the next slide, which is kind of the last piece of Sorensen, is working with students and teaching what we're learning. Because, as I mentioned, I think to Colby, I don't think that, or one of you guys, this social entrepreneurship is not going to be, and social impact, this is not going away. Like, it is going to be woven into everything that happens in the future. It just has to be. And as an example of that, when I went to business school, I don't even remember when it was, like 20 years ago. The first thing they would teach in business school at the time was, the purpose of business is to increase shareholder value. That line was basically like, when Josh, you start studying Spanish and they say, me llamo Josh, like, the first thing you learn in Spanish, or the first thing, that was the first thing you learned in business school. The purpose of business is to increase shareholder value. If you guys think about that, that is completely bananas. Like, can you imagine how, because of that statement, because we trained armies of smart people to think that business's sole purpose was to increase shareholder value, the damage that we did through corporations to our planet, to people, to the wealth gap, to all the things, right? And today, that is definitely not what you learn on your first day of business school anymore, not even a little bit. And so just to close the loop with Sorensen, there is a very intentional approach to not just the work that we do. Oops, sorry, there goes my watch. Not just the work that we do, but also teaching that work and incorporating students into the work, and not just incorporating them in a task-oriented role, but really actually saying, we need your input. We need to integrate that input. So anyway, so that's a little bit about Sorensen. So I'll stop there because I want to kind of touch on the topic of today, which is kind of what is social impact. I told you a little bit about what does that mean at Sorensen, but what is social impact versus social entrepreneurship? And then with respect to what you guys are thinking about in the future, how does this relate back to you? And so I think it's important to understand, let's start with just the difference between social entrepreneurship and social impact. So social entrepreneurship, obviously it's kind of entrepreneurship, meaning it's a business that is built, right? Whose at its core is solving a problem that addresses a social issue versus making a thing, for example, or providing something, right? So social entrepreneurship, whatever you're in the business of, is solving a problem that addresses a social issue. Now, you can have social impact driven companies that make a thing. So examples of that are Chobani. Chobani makes yogurt, right? They're not going to tell you that they're solving a social issue by making yogurt, but because their goal is to make the best Greek yogurt on the planet. That's what they're out to do. However, they are a social impact driven company. They believe in supporting the communities where they have manufacturing plants. They support refugees. They have changed their company such that all employees down to the manufacturing person who works in the plant is an equity owner in the company, right? So they are a social impact driven company. They are the antithesis of a company that says shareholder value is the goal of our business. Does that make sense? And so another company like that is Patagonia, or other companies who they make a thing or they provide a service. So it doesn't matter whether you go work for an accounting company or whether you go work for a biotech company. Those organizations today, I believe, must be considering their social impact. And it doesn't matter how they are going about it. It's theirs to choose, right? Marriott chooses to focus on human trafficking, right? Because human trafficking is a massive problem in these hotels that they have all over the globe. And so they have kind of gone all in terms of being policy influencers and drivers about changing the laws and kind of teaching people how to spot human trafficking as it's happening. But they're in the business of selling you a hotel room, right? So let me pause there. And the last thing I wanted to add that you won't see quite yet on our Sorensen slides, but is kind of like the final gamut. So you've got, we raise money, we do consulting, we measure, we tell the story, we teach, we run a summit, and the last piece of Sorensen is policy influence, right? And so how do we use the stories we've told? How do we use the data that we've gathered in these reports and this analysis? How do we use the businesses that are thriving because they're doing good but also doing well, and influence the law? And we do that through policy. So that's kind of the whole gamut about Sorensen. Let me just take a minute here and just say, what do you guys think? Interesting, more of something, less of something else? Any questions? Don't make me pick on you guys. You know that I was a professor for a while.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned in like comparing the two of social entrepreneurship and social impact, that with social entrepreneurship, the business is solving a social issue. So when it comes to running the business from a capital standpoint, how does that typically look? Whereas with like the social impact, they're selling a product, so they're like self-sustaining in that aspect. What does it
Yeah.
look like from the entrepreneur standpoint?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I actually built the whole organization around that question because I don't really care that you are a social entrepreneur and you are running a business, right? So even if you are a social entrepreneur serving a solving a social issue, that is still a business. And that business needs to make money. It needs to be able to reinvest. It needs to be able to raise money. So you have to treat it as a business. Just like if you're a company making a thing that has a social impact bent, you better not be spending more money on the social impact bent than actually on growing the business. Otherwise, you're going to run out of money and you're going to have no business, right? So business, the fundamentals of business are critical in terms of growing whatever you're doing. It's just that you can't use the fundamentals of business solely to grow profit for shareholder value. Does that make sense? So I'm going to come back to that a little bit, Josh, as I tell you guys a little bit about the company that I just sold and what we did and why. So let's kind of table that a little bit in terms of like how you can still build a successful business even through social enterprise or social entrepreneurship. So I think that's really important. Any other questions? No? All right. Okay. So I'm going to tell you guys a little story. So I am first gen university student. My parents were immigrants. They came to the United States. They met here. They stayed. My dad went to school till third grade. My mom had a high school diploma. They met here. And my dad became an entrepreneur, and they sent us to school in the US. English is my third language, which is why sometimes you'll pick up on that. I get my expressions kind of mixed up. Anyways, one of the things that was kind of in my DNA was entrepreneurship and the hustle of entrepreneurship and being able to always spot things around me that I would be curious about how could we do it better. And I think that is a skill that you can have no matter your background, no matter what. It's just the ability to train your brain to always be anywhere and be like, I wonder if I could do this better. Or, I wonder if there's a different way to do this. Or, oh, that is a smart business idea. What if we translated it to this, this, this? So that was kind of always, I think, this random skill that I had. And I started a number of companies, but my dad and my mom, they were very much like, look, you are going to college and you are going, right? Because they were like, we want you to have choices. We want you to have options. And I'm like, okay. But inevitably, I kept coming back to entrepreneurship. And one day, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, I was struggling with the fact that more and more women, I'm sure this is no surprise to you guys, more and more women graduate college, and more women have graduated college than men for over 10 years. Like, this is not new, right? And also more and more women are starting companies these days, either as a side hustle or as a full-time hustle. And in part, let's be honest, it's because the American work environment is not set up to be kind of family friendly, right? It took a lot to get like family leave acts. It took a lot to even forget paternity leave. Like it is a tough environment because we're such a capitalistic nation, right? Compared to other countries that really have great leave policies. And so you have a lot of women for whom entrepreneurship seemed like a great solution. And so we've been, over the last decade, losing more and more women to the traditional workforce, and they've been starting more and more companies. But those companies are not doing well. And so they're not doing poorly, but we have something like 14 million businesses owned by women in the United States. And over 88% of them make less than $100,000 a year. Now, I'm not telling you that the owner makes less than $100,000 a year. I'm saying the business brings in total less than $100,000 a year. And if you've ever taken a business class, if you've ever had a kid do a lemonade stand, the first thing you need to know about revenue, about a business is revenue minus cost equals profit. Like my kids are not allowed to have a lemonade stand without understanding how much are they going to make, what did it cost them, what's the profit, right? So revenue minus cost equals profitability. So when I tell you that 88% or more of these companies make less than $100,000 a year, that's at the top. And then of course they have to remove what they pay themselves, what it costs to run the company, whatever services they need, and then there's what's left. And so that really bothered me because it didn't make sense to me. I was like, so more and more women are getting educated and more women are starting companies. Why are those companies not thriving? And so there was a lot of hypothesis around why that could be. So there's a lot of people who say, oh, well, those women, they don't have access to funding. It's true. Only 1.4% of venture money goes to women. Fine. I wasn't going to tackle that beast. Other people would say, well, women network differently than men do. Men, like, they go and they have beers together and they play golf together and they do all this stuff together. And I was like, that's true. But have you ever sat outside a church or outside a school and watched women talk? Because what happens is one of them will say something like, I just bought a house, or I just moved to another apartment. And within 10 seconds, the other women will say, oh, you know who I should introduce you to? I should introduce so-and-so. She's an interior designer. Or I have a friend who can make curtains. Or you know what I mean? So women might not network in the same way, but they are communicators. And I just kind of started thinking, if we get women together and they collaborate, together they can help each other grow their business. What's happening is that they're smart and they throw themselves out there. But there's this thing referred to as the 5-word kiss of death with women. And it goes like this: I'll just do it myself. And so it is a characteristic that young girls have and that college age women have. I've seen it. I've seen it in my 8-year-old daughter. I've seen it in the women that I've taught in graduate levels and undergraduate levels. And I see it in business owners. I see it in women who are recently married and who just decide like, oh, I'll just handle the vacation and I'll just handle the groceries and I'll just handle the things, right? And so what happens is that women start these businesses and they kind of isolate themselves and they just assume, I'll just figure it out. I'm smart. I got this college degree. I'll just figure it out. And the truth is that in order to grow, you have to be able to, in order to grow relatively quickly, not only do you need to be able to have a community around you that supports you on the hard days, but you also need to be able to learn from others and actually learn. Because the reason that I went back to American University to teach in the business school was because I didn't believe that what we were teaching at the undergrad and graduate level was relevant to small business owners. It was relevant if you wanted to go pitch, for venture money. It was relevant if you needed to understand a term sheet, but it was not relevant if your goal was to build a small business, right? And so that's why I saw that there was an opportunity to actually bring women together who were what I would consider in the pool, meaning they had to have started a business. They couldn't have been like kind of sort of thinking about it, and bring them together in small groups where they could collaborate and connect and talk about how to grow. And that was how I started this company, because I was obsessed with a problem and I understood the problem because I had started a couple businesses myself, and it's really hard to start a business. And I have an MBA and I worked in consulting and I've helped multi-billion-dollar companies grow. And I would just sit there and I'd be like, why is this so hard? Right? And so I was obsessed with fixing this problem. And the problem was helping more women business owners thrive financially. And I did not care how they defined success. I did not care if their goal was to double in revenue or if their goal this year was to just stay steady so that they could take care of an aging parent or a child going through a hard time, and their whole, like, it didn't matter to me so long as they did have a goal that they could kind of stay accountable to within a group. And so my point in saying kind of at the beginning of when Josh was introducing me, that even if you've never thought of yourself as an entrepreneur, you can be a social entrepreneur. So when I first started Her Corner, which we eventually branded as Her Corner, it was not a business. It was just a problem that I saw. And I was like, wait a second, I think I have an idea to fix that. And my husband used to refer to it as my community service, because I would organize these women into groups. We'd meet over a potluck dinner in one another's homes. I would organize them, make sure there was no industry competition. I would have the topics and I'd facilitate the conversation. And you know what? More and more and more people started saying, hey, Fred, what are you doing? Like, can we have a group? I want a group. I'm in a different neck of the woods. Can I have a group over here? And so what I did was, maybe 6 months into this idea, I created a PowerPoint. And I got really sick and tired of sharing this PowerPoint. This was like before Google Slides was like really a thing. There was something called, I forget what it was, but I uploaded it to something. And I would say, here's the link to it. And I could see how many people were going, to share the link and see it. And this was my vision. I was like, no matter where you are in the world, if you're a woman trying to build a business, you should be able to find a peer group to connect and collaborate with to help you grow. That's it. That was kind of and within 30 days, I had 4,000 views of that PowerPoint. And so my business training told me, I have a market here. There is something here. That doesn't mean that I had a business yet, but there was a market. And if I could figure out how to properly serve that market with the right business structure, then I could build a business that was coming out of a social issue that I saw. And so that's why that business was referred to as a social entrepreneurship business. Does that make sense? So Josh, to get back to your question, we had so many businesses that approached us. We had to kind of interview folks and make sure that we were the right fit for them, right? And so the things that kind of, the businesses where we were not a good fit was somebody who would say to us, oh, my husband heard about you and he thinks I should do more networking and get here. And I was like, no. If you don't want to grow your business, we're not going to get along. But the ones that came to us that were a good fit were the organizations that said, oh, well, I'm a nonprofit, and so therefore I don't need to make money. I was like, oh, no. You do need to make money or your nonprofit's not going to be in business. Or the people that would come to us and say, we run this community-based yoga center and it's great, but like, we're in yoga. We don't do Excel. And I was like, no, you're in business. You need to do Excel. So let's work together, right? Or organizations that, my pet peeve, people who would say like, oh, I'm so lucky. My business just comes my way and I don't really have to market my business. So I don't really think I need to be here. And I'd say, yeah, that's great. You don't need to be here if you don't want to ever grow. But if you want to build a business where business starts coming to you without it being solely referral based, then you should be here, right? So the truth is that, and I may have some I don't know what I have to do with my materials because obviously it's not my company anymore. But we started creating workbooks and content, right? Content around how to grow. And we broke it down just kind of to bite-sized pieces that were manageable if you're a business owner. So if you're a business owner and running a company, and the idea of going back to business school to learn how to do this, first of all, you might find that stuff in business school isn't relevant to you because you're a small business owner. And second of all, who's got time for that? I mean, maybe you have time for it, but it's not everybody. And so we would tackle things one topic at a time. So how to build a pipeline, how to manage your pipeline, how to understand how quickly something goes from like, I'm interested down to close, and what's that process like? all the things, how to build a CRM, how to, you know, how to build a strategy, how to understand your numbers, how to build a cash flow projection model. We'd take them all one at a time. And that's what we taught. And so we expanded the business. We started in Washington. We ended up in Philly, New York, Baltimore, Montana. And then in 2019, I moved to New Zealand for a year. And I just packed up my kids and my husband and put the house up for rent, and off we went for a year. Thank goodness it was in 2019 before COVID. And we had an amazing year. And one of the most spectacular things that happened that I saw, and I really appreciated, Josh, how at the beginning you do that recognition of the land, because in New Zealand, boy, they are like so far ahead of us in terms of understanding equity, like how they treat one another, how they treat the indigenous population, how being Maori is something to be really proud of, how little kids learn to speak the language and they learn all the songs, no matter what background and race and nationality they come from, and how they consider it part of their job intrinsically at their core to be impact focused. And so you've got little kids that they're only 5 years old, but they know that buying a little plastic Ziploc baggie is like being part of the evil empire. And they want none of that. They're like, give me a wax wrap or like a reusable plastic container. And they are already learning about how to plant their own foods, how to grow things, how to be kind. Even the language that they use is different. And so I'll give you an example. At the time I had a little 5-year-old boy. Anybody knows 5-year-old boys so help you, right? Like they are like so much energy. And so if you take a little 5-year-old boy into a shop in the US, you know, what is the shop owner going to say? She's going to say something like, be careful, don't break anything, right? And she might say it really nicely. In New Zealand, they say things like, be gentle, right? Even the language that they use is different across the board. And so when I got back from New Zealand, that's when I decided to apply for and get into this fellowship with other social entrepreneurs, social impact investors, people from around the globe who are solving what I consider to be really big problems that I knew nothing about. Problems like regenerative farming, oceans, everything that, you know, I had been sitting here working on my one little tiny problem, women in entrepreneurship and helping those women make more money. And I was like, oh boy, like there are some really important critical issues as a globe we need to be focused on. And so that's why I decided at that time, I'm going to sell my organization to the next younger woman who is ready to take her corner and like put her own thumbprint on it. And I'm going to come to Sorensen and actually work with other really amazing, smart people at the University of Utah and tackle some of these massive issues that go beyond just helping women entrepreneurs. And so that is kind of my backstory and how I ended up at Sorensen. But the point is that you can find and you should demand and you should expect social entrepreneurial thinking as well as social impact in every company that you work for. Everywhere you go, these organizations should be thinking this way, right? They have to, because we all have a responsibility to the future to do better. You know, when I lived in New Zealand during that year, I traveled a lot, and I went to Indonesia and I went to Thailand, a lot of places down under the Southern Hemisphere. And one day I like to get up early in the morning, and I was walking around the beaches in Indonesia outside of our hotel. And I was like, what in the world is going on? And it was early. It was like, 6 o'clock or earlier. And I kid you guys not, I probably saw a row, like a lineup of at least 100 men with brooms and rakes all the way down the thing. And I was like, what are these guys doing? And the ocean, the tide would come in, and with it, it would bring so much plastic. I mean, like baby wipe containers. I mean, toothpaste containers. I mean, everything you could possibly imagine was coming in from the ocean. And these gentlemen's job was to take their rake and rake it off so the tourists wouldn't see it and put it somewhere for it to go into the trash, right? So that the tourists wouldn't see it. But then you would go into the ocean in Thailand and you're, swimming around and all you see is plastic floating around, right? Like, you guys, I was in Utah this summer when the fires happened. Like, we all know that this is upon us, right? And so my overall message today is, even if you've never thought of yourself as an entrepreneur, everyone is capable of spotting an opportunity to help in their community. And you don't have to be thinking like, how do I save the oceans? Unless that's interesting to you, right? You could just be thinking, how do I address poverty? How do I address, making food pantries healthier? How do I address, like, whatever it is? And don't worry about calling it a business. Don't worry about being like, I'm an entrepreneur. Just figure out, what can I do about it? And that's how it starts. Okay, I just talked for a long time. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute. Who wants to jump in? Josh, I know you had some questions, but let's see if anybody else has any thoughts too. Either I put you all to sleep or you're just like, I don't know, this lady's a little out there.
So, sorry, I'm kind of trying to collect my thoughts.
No problem.
So you discussed choosing something you care about and what you can do to change on these issues and not worry about making it into a business or being an entrepreneur. As like a college student who's busy and feels like I can only do so much, what are the best places for like someone to start as a college student to be able to grow into being able to do something bigger in the future?
Yeah, I totally respect the pressure that, first of all, I do not mean to put on you to go out and find your thing, because that's a lot of pressure, especially when you are studying and perhaps working another job and maybe taking care of whomever around you. My advice is, again, take the word entrepreneurship and business out of it entirely and start by just saying, what do I care about? And what motivates me? And I think that will serve you on a number of fronts, because when you graduate, you're going to have to look for a job, presumably. And if you already know what motivates me, what matters to me, then it's going to be a lot easier to spot it and to recognize if companies have cultures that care about the same things or not. And so as you start with that very simple question, which is a simple question that's hard to answer, you will begin to find and see things around you that resonate with you. So for example, when I was 22, I would have never in a million years, first of all, I was so busy trying to prove to all the boys that I could like compete at their level and then some, that the very thought of building an organization just for women, I was like, I'm gonna have to take myself out to the alley and kick my own butt. Like it was so far, I would have never even thought that there was any chance that I would be kind of this feminist, developing feminist. However, what I realized when I sat down is that what I cared about was fairness. What I cared about was an equal shot at me working as hard as the guy next to me and getting the same opportunities for the same job at the same pay. And that the more I thought about like, why do I care about that stuff? I started realizing more and more like, accidentally, I was always the one in jobs or at school who was leading the women's groups or I went to an all-girls school for a long time. Like, you could begin to recognize the threads in your life, even if we're so busy half the time that we don't always see them, right? So that's why I'm saying these are simple questions that are hard to answer because they take some introspection, but the answers are there. And so honestly, Lindsay, you don't have to put the pressure on yourself to start something. Just knowing that one day in the future, you'd like to start a business or you'd like to start a social venture, that's awesome. But that's not today's like job, right? Today's job, first and foremost, is take care of yourself, get through school, graduate, whatever you've already, set out to do. And while you're at it, ask yourself, what do I care about? What motivates me? And is there anything around me? You might already be doing it. You might already be, helping with this time of year, there's so many food drives. You might already be involved in food drives. And what does that mean? Maybe you care about food insecurity. Maybe you care about, access to healthier food. Like there's just, the answer is not going to materialize. It's rare, really rare that the answer materializes overnight, just like that. So you kind of have to look for the common threads. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing your story and all these different nuggets of information throughout the talk so far. And what I heard was a lot of it sort of starts with that mindset. That mindset for like open possibilities, that mindset for caring for certain causes and what have you. I'm wondering if along your journey or currently, what are you sort of reading, watching, or listening to as to either that mindset or your work on campus?
Well, what I'm reading and listening to a lot right now is about impact measurement. Because like I said, I didn't have a background in this. So I'm trying to get smarter about it. I think, so I'm a big believer, honestly, in having kind of time to be working on stuff that is like professional development. So what are you reading, watching, et cetera, professionally, but also what makes you laugh and what separates you from all of that stuff. So I'll say, like, just on a lighter note, that podcast, Smartless, have you ever heard of it? It's freaking hilarious. And it's the whole concept is you listen to it and you are less smart. But my point is that we have to have outlets, right? You have to have time also when you're not only listening and diving into the most important stuff. But I'm going to pull up my Audible list because I constantly am listening and reading and watching video all the time. And I'll tell you some of my favorite books that I've been reading in the last 2-3 months because I go through a lot. Lean Impact is an excellent book on understanding how to, like, the lean model is basically like, how do you start a business without spending a bunch of money, right? And so this is how it's applied specifically to impact-based organizations. I'm obsessed with this book called How the Word is Passed. And it's by this gentleman, Dr. Clint Smith, on how American history was written and is taught versus what truly happened. It's excellent. Let's see what else is in here. Oh yeah. So if you guys are interested in the social impact space, there is one person who is my absolute idol, and she is really kind of like the founder of this space, and she's now exclusively focused on solving poverty. Her name is Jacqueline Novogratz. and her organization is called the Acumen Fund. And you should read her first book. She has a new book out, but her first book was called The Blue Sweater. And she grew up actually in Virginia, not too far from here. And she went to UVA. And then in between UVA, she decided like, hey, you know, I'm gonna take a year and go work in Africa. And she's walking down some road in Africa and she sees a kid who's wearing this blue sweater. And she's like, I swear that's my favorite blue sweater that my mom made me give away because she thought it looked too tight on me. And so she chases down this young woman who's wearing this blue sweater. She looks in the collar and sure enough, it says Jacqueline Novogratz. And so it's the beginning of her awareness of how every little thing like donating clothing can have an impact on somebody else's life and what the cycle of kind of poverty looks like, where it starts, where it ends, etc. So anyways, Manifesto for a Moral Revolution is her most recent book as well. Excellent, excellent. So, yeah. I know we only have a few minutes left, so any other questions? Or Josh, do you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to end on two questions. I'll start with the last one first. Once you finish up, could you share with us how we can work with Sorensen, what the dates are to apply and that sort of thing? And then the question that I feel like would be fitting has to do with time and results. You mentioned in regards to Lindsay's question, we feel this pressure to do something now, but you said, you know, just keep in your mind, take it one step at a time. So with that being said, with the different projects that you work on and in general, how long does it usually take to see results?
Yeah, so the question about how to get involved. Sorensen is actively recruiting students now for internships across all the dimensions. So if you're interested in, is it Nick, you were doing accounting, or if you're interested in the finance side, there's an, you know, internship with impact investing, there's impact consulting, there's impact storytelling. I think there's a fourth one, maybe impact policy already. And that closes on November 30th. And so that should be on our website, but if you can't find it, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, it's like one of the most recent things I shared. Nick, did you have a question before I talk about how long things take?
Yeah, I have been scouring the website because I think it sounds really interesting. Is that application deadline for the spring?
Yeah.
Or is that for, okay.
Yeah, it's for next spring. Yep. These things take time. There's a word in this space, there's a phrase, patient capital. It was actually coined by Jacqueline Novogratz. Patient capital is the opposite of the American view of capitalism. And if you are truly interested in hearing about incredible stories of how if you give something the time, what can happen, you should listen to Jacqueline's or read her latest book on Manifesto for Moral Revolution, because she talks about these stories in India and all parts of the world where people see an opportunity and people tell them, you're crazy, that'll never happen. For example, you know, it was just, I don't know much about the holiday, the Diwali light holiday that was just yesterday, I think. But I believe one of the things that happens is people buy lots and lots and lots of flowers and they put them in the rivers in India, right? Except that these flowers are sprayed with pesticides and stuff like that in order to preserve them and maybe make them more colorful. And they're actually killing the rivers. And so these two entrepreneurs were like, what if we just got them back out of the river, dried them out, and used them to create the incense sticks that people then buy and go and put in the temples? And people were like, you're crazy. Like, can you even imagine? It's not worth it. Like, we've been doing it this way forever and ever. And this is one of the stories in her book, how they created this business. And it didn't start as a business. It started as let's just try it. Let's just see how many pounds of flower petals we can get out of the rivers and dry them out. And can we make halfway decent incense sticks that people would like? And so the long answer is it takes time. It takes time from an investment perspective. It takes time because if you're the one with the idea, you have got to really understand the problem. And so as a culture, we want to jump right into the solution. It's really a problem that you guys may just pay attention around you. The minute you talk about something, people are going to tell you how you should think about solving it, what you should do about it, before they've really truly stopped to listen and understand you explained the problem. And so individually, we do that too. And so the most valuable thing you can do in order to see larger impact and larger results later is to really understand the problem. And so that's one of the core values at Sorensen. We call it the 7 whys. Ask why 7 times, just like little kids. You know, why aren't women doing well? Well, why if we gave them more money, wouldn't they do well? And what, all the things, right? So lean impact talks about that a lot as well. So yeah, it takes a while. Unless you have a boatload of money, and you're maybe related to, who's the blonde guy, Virgin Atlantic, I'm talking about? Virgin America.
Sir
Richard Branson. And you want to just pile a bunch of money into it, then you'll see a quicker result. So, all right, you guys, I know we're a little bit over time, so I want to be thoughtful to everybody's time. Thank
Perfect.
you for having me.
So much.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and
cut you off.
for sharing your time with me.
Thank you.
Perfect. And
All right,
with
you
that
guys.
said, oh, sorry. With that being said, thank you so much for participating in this session, and a special thank you to Frédérique. That was very insightful. We appreciate your time, your knowledge, and your experience. And then for the guests that have been with us, there will be a survey sent out shortly after the conference, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback so that we can make the conference even better next year.
Bye, you guys. Happy Saturday.